You're listening to The Art of Procurement, episode 133, brought to you by PalmBridge. So to learn more about how to access top procurement talent from around the world on an on-demand basis, just head on over to palmbridge.com.
Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And I'm joined today by Shaz Khan. Shaz is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Vroozi, who are a leading cloud-based business purchasing platform. Shaz has a deep background in procurement technology, with a particular focus on SAP, with roles on the practitioner side at Warner Brothers, and then on the service provider side as managing partner at Sienna Solutions and senior vice president of NetSol Technologies, where Shaz led their SAP professional services and strategic consulting divisions. And I welcomed the opportunity today to talk to Shaz. As long-time listeners will know, I learn more and more every day about the nuts and bolts of procurement technology, while I tend to spend more time looking at the trends that I think will impact our profession. And one of those trends is self-service sourcing, so empowering users really from across the entire organization to buy directly the vast majority of products and services that they need once we've put in place the frameworks and the governance kind of structure to allow them and to enable them to do that. And so the main topic for today's conversation is that of self-service sourcing. It feels like a bit of a tongue twister. So is it a threat or is it an opportunity for procurement? So I hope you enjoy the show, and let me know what you think about this topic by just dropping me a note, leaving it in the show notes comments on the webpage. I will give you the URL for the show notes at the end of today's episode. All right, thanks a lot. Take care, and I will talk to you again soon. So hi everybody, and welcome to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Shaz Khan, the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Vroozi. So Shaz, welcome to the show.
Philip, thank you for having me on.
No, I'm delighted you're able to join me. And my first question is one that I'm starting to ask a little bit more of all my guests. And it's just really, what are you passionate about right now when it comes to the day-to-day work that you have on your plate and the impact that that has on the procurement community?
Well, I think some of the initiatives that we're very proud of within our organization right now, and some of the themes that we're seeing that are coming out quite strongly in procurement, is data visualization. Mm-hmm. Not just of your day-to-day business operations, but also procurement activities. There's been a tremendous evolution in data visualization tools over the last decade. And today, businesses are moving faster and faster, and companies need to have access to information anytime, anywhere, in order to drive better decisions that affect the health and sanctity of the business. And so from a procurement standpoint, this could be getting alerts on the fiscal health of your supplier base based on economic indicators, understanding which suppliers are accounting for most of your procurement business, identifying opportunities for cost savings and tail spend categories in your supplier consolidation framework. So we see this as becoming, an increasing theme within organizations. Right. You need to have access to data, and you need to have it readily available so that you can make better strategic decisions on guiding the company forward.
Yeah, so no longer looking at spend analytics that are 3 months old or 6 months old. It's really looking at a whole different set of data points, and also real time and, hopefully predictive.
Absolutely. And I think the predictive piece is actually probably one of the more exciting elements of where we see innovation in procurement. Predicting price trends, mm-hmm. Predicting, the health of a supplier base, not just one tier down, but throughout the supply chain, so that companies can pivot and make adjustments in order to basically, get the value they need from their supplier base. And that predictive piece is what we feel is just a starting point for a lot of organizations today.
Right. What's the biggest challenge to me for procurement that I feel, and it's not just a procurement challenge, I think a general business challenge, is actually how to get hold of that data, where to look for it, how to cleanse it so that it actually makes sense. What are the data sources? Are you seeing organizations kind of get a better handle on that? And if so, maybe you could just share a couple of the things that they're doing to start implementing more predictive analytics and kind of looking at data in a different way.
Well, absolutely. I think organizations are first asking, is this important for us to do? And the overwhelming answer is yes. The challenge is where to find all of these tidbits of information amongst these vaulty lofts of data that sit in various tool sets or cabinets or databases. And that is a huge challenge today, that companies, they can't just be looking at data 3 years old. They have to look at historical data from 20 years and see the evolution of that to make better decisions. And accessing that data becomes a challenge. And I think also what you see is companies with all of this data need to go through a ritualistic cleansing process, right? A lot of this data that they actually bring in to data visualization tool sets becomes very old and stale and gives a different view of the business than required.
So from your vantage point then, what's the health of the procurement function right now? And perhaps you could share what you see as maybe some risks, but also some opportunities.
Well, I think procurement is healthy, but it really needs a jump start.
Yeah.
And, if you look at the evolution of technology and business process automation, you had finance and manufacturing integration and automation in the 90s, CRM in the early 2000s, HR automation in the mid 2000s. And now you see procurement really taking center stage. And the way we look at it, procurement executives need to set lofty goals and think much bigger. And we call it the 100% rule. 100% spend visibility on all spend categories, including, the traditional proverbial ignored categories like marketing, food, and legal. 100% supplier participation with e-catalogs and sourcing events, 100% end user adoption, 100% AP automation, right? Without setting those types of goals, companies are really just quick to just basically be complacent on 30% usability of the software or 25% supplier integration and automation. And that really doesn't lead itself to true process optimization and automation within the company. Right. If you don't have that all, it becomes very difficult.
And it's going beyond that traditional notion, I think, and this is what I talk about a lot, of procurement. We're not just an optimizer, or we shouldn't just be an optimizer of what a business wants and what a business needs, but actually try and help the business understand what else is out there, what are the disruptions that are coming down. So we actually start to influence and shape the business needs rather than just try and help our organizations buy them a little bit better.
Oh, there's a lot to that, right? I think historically you've seen procurement departments as that kind of transactional trendsetter. Okay, go and perform transaction A and give me the result of that transaction, right? And whether it's negotiating a contract, running a sourcing event, but the true power of procurement comes in educating the company on what is out there in the market for companies to obtain, looking at, different suppliers, what those suppliers are doing that might be beneficial to the business, and really becoming influencers on how to actually run the business better. Right. And I think those things are converging now, where it's just moving outside of just that normal transactional function to more having a seat at the strategic table, if you will, to basically drive business initiatives.
And part of actually, we talked a couple of weeks ago before we sat down to record, and what you just said there reminds me of that. You talked about the fact that we're in a desperate need of a PR overhaul, and I think it ties into the notion of what our role in the organization is. And I just wondered if you could elaborate just a little bit on your thinking in terms of what perhaps we need to do differently or better to make ourselves a little bit more understood within an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Philip, you're hitting on a passion point of mine, which is, procurement professionals and executives historically have not been effective self-promoters of their department charter and the value that they bring to an organization. And as a result, you have employees in companies who might not have a complete picture of the procurement department and role that it brings to the company. And, you need to have strong senior leadership in procurement to drive this constantly within companies, right? Leaders need to showcase, engage with the employee base on what they're doing in procurement, how they're integrating with suppliers today, and what are the metrics that these procurement departments are hitting that make the company run better.
Right.
And I think that is something that really needs to be done, is that procurement should have a marketing arm that is either part of the procurement function or lended from a corporate marketing function or team. And that marketing team should just be about promoting the value of procurement and celebrating successes and failures equally.
Yeah, certainly celebrating the successes, I think, is really important and something that we don't do enough. And I've actually, on a previous show, had a marketer on the show because I think we can learn so much from outside of our profession, both in sales and in marketing, and applying those internally. But if I was to play devil's advocate, one of the things that comes up in my mind is that perhaps the reason why we have to continue to be better at selling ourselves or marketing what we do is because maybe we're not providing the services that the business wants from us. And I wondered if there's something to that, or whether you think that's a little bit too simplistic.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the educational component and the promotion component, which is what is the role of the procurement department and what are they there to do to bring success to an organization, right? And setting those goals up front are incredibly, incredibly important for companies. And I think what we see with companies today is the procurement departments are like still being treated as back office functions. Go talk to Joe over there and, get your contract negotiated and he'll come back to you in a couple of weeks. I mean, that's not the true value of procurement. The true value of procurement is becoming the central banking transaction of an organization and explaining and educating the company on what that means.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things also when we talked previously, just in our pre-interview, you passionately talked about platforms and marketplaces. It's something that I hear more and more, and it's something I'm actually really interested too as well from a procurement perspective, more on the services side, the managed services rather than technology side. But I wondered if, to start with, you could just quickly define what you mean when you think about platforms and marketplaces, just so that we're both on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, at Vroozi, we look at platform and marketplace as really an integrated ecosystem of modules that is completely automated and interconnected across the procurement value chain, right? And so from requisitioning to sourcing to online catalog content that's refreshed amongst your supplier population daily, weekly, whatever those terms are. And then obviously the integration into, your AP and financial systems.
Yeah.
We look at platforms as a way for companies to pick and choose what elements they need to optimize their procurement process and give them those tool sets. And most importantly, do it in a way that is seamless. Right. And so when you look at true automation today, companies go and talk about, well, we have an integration framework. Well, 3 months later, you're integrating one process with another process. That's not true automation. That's a lot of heavy lifting and building. True automation is being able to actually select a system that you're working with, whether it's your back-end financial system, checking it on and being able to connect to it in real time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is something that is still being lost upon a lot of companies, because the marketing of some of this software technology is ahead of the market and doesn't match up to what it truly does.
So it's just an interesting point you make there about the fact that perhaps some of the marketing is ahead of what the capabilities are. I'm wondering if I don't want you to name names or cite specific examples, but if there's perhaps certain areas of technology where you think that perhaps the rhetoric is a little bit further ahead of what the reality is.
Sure. No, I think when you look at integration, no systems or processes live on islands. They can, but they won't be effective. Right? So in other words, your procurement system, whatever you put in, needs to talk to the finance system. That's a must. It's not a choice. Right. But when you look at the reality of making those connections happen and really bringing that seamless and touchless integration between those systems, those become laborious projects that can really derail your corporate procurement initiatives.
Yeah.
Right. If you're spending years integrating platforms together, you're really missing out on the opportunity of true automation. Right. And so oftentimes we see, marketing speak saying, hey, one-click automation.
Yeah.
What does that really mean?
Right.
What does that truly mean? Or is there really a lot of stuff that needs to be done in advance to make that one-click automation even happen? And what is the true cost to make that one-click automation a reality? And so, just to give you an example, we've recently integrated with a few financial systems, and it's true automation. If this is the system that you use from a financial standpoint, you select it, you're automatically now connected with it, and you can exchange data between your Vroozi purchasing system and your financial system within minutes.
Right.
And that's what we see as true automation and backing up that type of marketing rhetoric.
And so it's trying to think of it in terms that I can get a little bit more. I'm thinking of it as it's almost like the platform is the smartphone, the operating system on the smartphone, and then the marketplaces within it and all the things that connect into the platform are what you would go into the app store to go and buy. And you can basically buy various different apps that connect into this central platform, that the ultimate goal is that they all then connect together in a way that, is seamless to you. You don't actually notice that everything's talking to each other, but it allows you to buy, the app that you want for each specific task that you need or each specific function. So you don't then have to just go instead of buy something that's maybe end to end, but doesn't really do what you want it to. Is that kind of how it all fits together?
Yeah, you've made some very salient points there. And I think that is really what we see as the future. It's not just about the software, it's the consumption and distribution channel of the software. So as a new employee coming into a new organization, as you've eloquently stated, going into an app store, finding out the technology and applications that are available for you to use, and being able to select all of those with just a click of a button. And now you have all of the tool sets that allow you to do your job.
Right.
And they're seamlessly interconnected, and you don't have to worry about licensing costs. You don't have to, because you're just focusing on your job, right? And getting the tool sets within the corporation to make you successful. And I think that's where we see a huge sea change and evolution in thinking in corporations.
How far are we away from something like that? And maybe it's not even on a technology side; it's on the the human change management. But is this something that's 5-10 years into the future, or something that's possible today?
I think it's certainly possible today, and I think you see many companies that have already embraced software delivery platforms within their corporations. I think if you look at kind of this app store, we're still a few years away. And the reason why is that when you look at enterprise apps, there are not a lot of enterprise apps out there today that actually provide true business value, right? So besides your data visualization and reporting and maybe your CRM, capabilities. There's still a kind of a dearth of enterprise applications. And number two is they're not connected.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to see in the next 2 or 3 years this big movement on best of breed applications that are going to come into an enterprise and where employees can pick and choose those, and they're already pre-integrated.
Yes,
but I don't see that happening, for the next few years.
Okay, interesting. Well, the reason why, and the main topic that I wanted to talk on today, and it actually fits nicely in with that, because when I start to look at the future of procurement, the future procurement delivery models, to me, I think about the fact that the vast majority of products or services that we buy, and they can be bought directly by a user or by a stakeholder. There really isn't a need for procurement to get involved. And, you talk to people that are working within the business and they say, well, I can buy things on Amazon. I don't know, Amazon is always kind of the use case that's cited because so many of us use it in our personal lives. But why isn't that why can't I go and do something like that so easily when I'm at work? I wonder if that's kind of the way that you see the future of at least the majority of things that we buy. And is it something that you hear people talking about today when you're talking to prospects and clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Philip, the distribution and delivery model of procurement is going to rapidly change.
Yeah.
And this is something that we think is going to happen not within years, but within this year.
Interesting.
We see HR as a use case where every employee has access to their HR record and can potentially make changes to that record, whether it be an address change or some type of form that needs to be uploaded. Well, we look at procurement as a core business function that every employee should have access to. And it should be where it's ubiquitous. The problem today is that when you look at corporations that have procurement systems in place, you roughly see about 10 to 15% of the employee population having a license to use a specific software tool to procure. The reality on the ground is every employee has made a request one time or another for something. And they've wanted to purchase something. Right. But they've had to go and actually then put a sticky note, send an email, make a phone call to a respective buyer and say, look, I need this laptop. I need this docking station. I need, a replenishment of coffee. These are all functions that should be self-service and accessible to any employee. And we have really taken this to heart as part of our company charter that we've recently put out what's called the Purchase Express within Vroozi. And what that allows companies to do is any employee can self-register and have access to the procurement portal powered by Vroozi. They can request any items that they need, and then those items get sent for approval and processing by a designated individual that might have what we call more power tools at their disposal. But the key element here is that accessibility. You're giving procurement and tool sets and visibility of where you can buy, who you can buy from, and how much you can buy up front, as opposed to allowing people to guess on what they're capable of doing on the procurement side.
Do you think some of that is deliberate, though, where companies don't give access to their people to buy, even if you have an approval chain in place, because either they don't want employees to know what the possible is, what they could possibly buy, because then they'll end up buying things that perhaps they don't need, or it's just a way of kind of having some kind of control, and there's maybe a fear that people will go again and spend money that they don't need to spend, and maybe that people within their management structures will even approve that because they don't want to. They see by saying no to an employee, maybe doing something for that employee's morale. Let's say, for example, so it's deliberate that people aren't given access to buy things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that in terms of the mentality of companies today. Opening up procurement and making it kind of a wild, wild west, right? Oh, we're getting now way too many orders. And I think you combat that with putting in effective controls into the system that meet the compliance and governance objectives of your organization.
Yeah.
So, for example, putting in budget alerts, right, in terms of the budget allocation to certain departments, cost centers, employee bases, putting in really proper approval workflows that if, for example, you're buying a non-standard IT product, it requires another set of eyes besides a financial approver.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you wanted to buy a special mouse, right? That's not part of the standard IT package. So adding another type of strategic sourcing approver into the mix. And I think what we see is that all of this is happening today, right? People are still requesting products in order to do their job, but they're doing it in ways which are completely inefficient. Yeah. Right? They're writing on Post-it notes and giving it to an office manager, right? They're sending emails saying, I need a new laptop to a buyer. Okay, what kind of laptop? What's the spec sheet? Or do we have corporate pricing with a strategic IT vendor? Right? Bringing that information up front and combining it with proper compliance and governance frameworks, to us is a complete winning equation and will lead to better process efficiencies within companies.
You talked about governance and compliance frameworks. I think those are key. Now, do you see that the next evolution then is automating this so that those checks and balances are actually built within the logic of the tool and the system so that they don't need to go through approvers and somebody can just buy something if it is with process or with in compliance with what your organization wants you to be able to do, they can just do that with one click and it doesn't need to go through an approval process because the system will take care of that itself.
Well, and here we get into a really big investment area of procurement, which is machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? Being able to intelligently identify trends within the organization, but more importantly, allowing people to set the framework for governance and compliance within the platform without having to code or write a single line of code.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is what we feel is the heart of self-service.
Right.
It's not just the self-service capability of user access to procurement tools and software sets. It's the actual control mechanism that companies can have within a SaaS product or platform that allows them to build to order, right? Configure their own, approval workflow rules, import their own policies into the tool set, understand what spend categories require special approval, being able to put budgetary errors and notifications on the screen based on certain events and triggers. And that, to me, is really one of the more exciting elements of these types of cloud platforms like Vroozi, because we're putting in all those power tools for companies to actually build and configure their procurement policies and procedures directly into the system without any coding.
When I think about the future of self-sourcing, well, self-service sourcing, and I think that can be such a big part of procurement in the future, it is about the fact that there really isn't any human input whatsoever over and above the requester, because the system itself takes care of the compliance and the governance, and it has used machine learning over time to figure out that this is acceptable, this isn't acceptable, this is where some nuances are. Perhaps this is a user who seems to have to need additional approvals because they're buying things that maybe they shouldn't on more occasions, and kind of flag up the red flags for human intervention rather than bringing everything for human intervention. And then taking it a step further, and this is kind of where my next question is going, is around expanding that from products and services that maybe more commoditized, off the shelf, to things that are a lot more customized, a lot more, human-based, solution-based rather than just products. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit as to where you see that going and how the potential of self-service sourcing can be expanded to more complex buys, more complex purchases.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of use cases today with automating commonly used items within an organization, right? So if you take kind of a office kitchen, for example, you can build in intelligent reorder points into your ordering channels for coffee, right? And other types of commodities within the kitchen, right? For more complex procurement, there is still that human touch that is required. And where we see that evolving is the use of video. So, for example, being able to actually negotiate with a supplier who might be doing a specialized service contract for you, whether it's a IT automation project or some type of web design work or maybe some facilities maintenance work. Well, you'll never get rid of the art of negotiation. Right? Which is the ability for you to not only just have a phone call with the supplier within the platform, but actually be able to connect to the supplier via video and make that negotiation real and locked in via a video call. And I think that is really an interesting area, because when you look at traditional complex services procurement, look at utility companies where 70% of their spend is services driven. A lot of that spend is focused on, project-based work, building out a new transformer or building out new utility lines. And that requires careful planning, but it also requires careful and improved collaboration with your trading partners. And the use of video can really, really assist with that initiative.
So you make a good point there about video, and especially in when you're selecting suppliers, we often just look at numbers today, and we base it on numbers. We base it on an RFP, and as you think about the video, it brings a lot more of kind of the partnership. You start to understand who you're working with. You start to draft solutions with people. You start to go beyond what maybe your off-the-shelf solution is to figure out, how could we work together to really build something that fits your specific needs as a company. But I'm interested within this kind of notion of self-service sourcing. Is there still only a certain fragment or portion of spend do you think that would apply to? Or is it something that, essentially taking away a lot of strategic procurement, you could apply to anything that a company buys?
Yeah, video can be integrated into any type of spend category, whether you're doing marketing spend, whether you're at a corporate event and you need something from a supplier immediately, like a TV for a booth.
Yeah.
Right? These are areas where, regardless of the type of spend, it's always great to actually see somebody on the other side and be able to actually connect with that individual. Because if you're going to be in business with a trading partner, it's not just about the service and how great their technology is. Are you getting a good sense of their culture as a company? Yeah. And does it mesh with your culture? Right. And a large part of sourcing is about relationship building. Right. And video can help make those relationships that much stronger, because oftentimes you have companies and suppliers that are in different geographies. Look at IT outsourcing as an example. Yeah. Many technology companies outsource all of their IT work to different parts of the world. Well, if you're not connecting with those individuals via video, it's just a numbers game. Yeah. It's input and output, and you cannot connect with that group and really truly convey what you're trying to deliver and build, which then leads to inadequate product. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for just having that human connection, that face-to-face connection, albeit over video, even if it's just the first time. So you actually feel as though you're talking and working with somebody that you know, rather than just somebody who's on the other end of an email.
That's right.
A lot of what we talked about really includes the devolution of some of the procurement responsibilities back into the business. And that's something that, a lot of procurement leaders aren't necessarily comfortable with. What kind of advice do you give to procurement leaders as they start to think about, should I start to put some of the responsibilities for buying, even just a portion of what it is that we buy today, back to the stakeholders and back to the users in the business?
I think I look at it as three major things.
Yeah.
Make it simple, make sure it works, and market the solution effectively and constantly, right? And so today, procurement leaders are holding on to their tool sets and saying, okay, everything needs to go through my corporate buyers. The reality is every employee is a negotiator and has strategic sourcing capabilities in a company. And bringing that function and bringing that type of mindset into corporations can only lead to better results, provided you have a platform that allows for those checks and balances, right? Where people cannot just go and say, I want this, I don't care at all costs.
Right.
I want, this $5,000 laptop, right? You have to bring that level of control in place. But the number one thing for us is you have to make this simple. The employee base is increasingly becoming mobile. They're increasingly becoming conversant on a number of different technologies.
Yeah.
And you have to give them tool sets that they're happy with. And if they're happy with them, they'll use them. And you'll see that end user adoption and the 100% rule get realized.
Right. Yeah. I think this is really important because I actually had a conversation with the Chief Procurement Officer of Dun & Bradstreet for an interview, which will go out before our conversation does. And, they did a project around onboarding of suppliers and tied it to customer satisfaction, that actually by providing a more of a frictionless process for their stakeholders within the business to go and interact with suppliers, increased their customer satisfaction exponentially, which then led the people within the business to take a different view of procurement and to come to procurement on more strategic things and the things where we can make more of a difference in the business. So I think taking steps like this to try and to actually give some responsibility back into the business for the things that are more transactional in nature, at least to start with, actually helps you and build your reputation, and then ties back in actually to what you said at the beginning about the PR perspective and how people within the business actually perceive us. So I think that the whole notion of self-service sourcing has so many benefits for a procurement organization that go far over and above, even if there's any kind of minor loss of control, because as long as you've got the right compliance and the right governance within the tool, employees still aren't going to be able to go and do something that that you don't want them to go and do.
Right, and I believe, Philip, compliance should be rewarded and being transparent as well. Right. So if you look at kind of the evolution of gamification within certain business functions, it should be front and center within procurement. If you have employees that are high participating in procurement transactions, saving companies money by using preferred suppliers and contracted suppliers, meeting spend diversity objectives, those types of metrics should be rewarded, whether it's a $25 employee gift card or a PTO day, right? There are various ways to reward employees. And when you start rewarding employees based on behavioral changes that they're making to impact the business positively, great things happen for companies.
So as we wrap up, I have a final question. It's not really related to self-service sourcing particularly, but it's, from your vantage point, you get to see a lot of clients, you got to see a lot of prospects. You're working with a lot of companies who are able to take that leap from maybe being a transactional role in their business to somebody that's a little bit more integral. And so I wondered if you could just share your perspective on what differentiates those that are able to kind of go to that next level and integrate procurement really to be a strategic part of the business.
I think when you look at the procurement function today and the client bases that are taking procurement and supercharging it within the business, you are seeing a tremendous focus on collaboration and partnering.
Right.
And I think this is what's really driving this next generation of procurement professionals and leadership, are people that are not satisfied with the status quo.
Yeah.
And continuously looking for innovation, automation, and improvements in the procurement cycle. And so when you look at procurement, it used to be, procurement had a need, IT would source or find the selected vendors, corporate finance would sign off on the check.
Yeah.
Right. And today it's about actually all three entities coming together, combining forces, and mutually agreeing on a charter for what they're trying to achieve up front. And procurement now is actually one of the major areas that are promoting different vendors and different technology automation capabilities and different areas for generating cost savings, right? And that is a huge, huge sea change we're seeing now. Is procurement is at the strategic table now, saying we can do this and we can do it together, and we are going to do it together and deliver value.
Well, on that, I know that we have to bring the discussion to a close. So this is, I always say this is the easiest question. If listeners would like to connect with you directly or maybe find out a little bit more about yourself or about Vroozi, where would be the best place for them to go? And then I'll include the details in our show notes today.
Thank you, Philip. I think if you go to the Vroozi website and go to company, you can find all of our social media handles, as well as our LinkedIn profiles. Yep. And happy to connect with a number of folks.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Those show notes are going to be at artofprocurement.com/Shaz, which is SHAZ or a Z, depending on whereabouts you are in the world. And I still struggle to say the letter Z. But it's, artofprocurement.com/Shaz. We'll include the links to Vroozi and the notes from today's conversation. So one more time, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Philip, and continue doing what you're doing. It's definitely needed in the market, and appreciate your efforts.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.